Kristu Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, this morning we're starting a new chapter, chapter 16. This is the first canto, chapter 16, verse number 1. Sutta Uvacha Tatak Parikshid Dvijavarya Shikshaya Tatak Parikshid Dvijavarya Shikshaya Mahing Mahabhagavatah Shashasaha Mahing Mahabhagavatah Shashasaha Yatahi Sutyam Abhijata Kovidah Yatahi Sutyam Abhijata Kovidah Samadhishan Vipra Mahad Gunastatha Samadhishan Vipra Mahad Gunastatha Sutta Uvacha Tatak Parikshid Dvijavarya Shikshaya Mahing Mahabhagavatah Shashasaha Yathahi Sutyam Abhijata Kovidah Samadhishan Vipra Mahad Gunastatha. Please chant. Sutta Uvacha Tatak Parikshid Dvijavarya Shikshaya Mahing Mahabhagavatah Shashasaha Mahatityam Abhijata Kovidah Samadhishan Vipra Mahad Gunastatha Sutta Uvacha Yatahi Sutyam Abhijata Kovidah Samadhishan Vipra Mahad Gunastatha Sutta Uvacha Tatak Parikshid Dvijavarya Mahing Mahabhagavatah Shashasaha Yatahi Sutyam Abhijata Kovidah Samadhishan Vipra Mahad Gunastatha Sutta Uvacha tatak parikshid javarya sikshaya mahi mahabhagavatah shashasaha yatha hi sutyam abhijata kovidah samadhi sandipra mahagunastatha Vaishvacha Tatha parikshid vijasari shikshaya mahi mahabhagavatak shishasaha yatha hi sutyam abhijata kovida samadhi sandipra mahagunastatha Sutta uvacha Tatha parikshid javarya sikshaya mahi mahabhagavatak shishasaha yatha hi sutyam abhijata kovida samadhi shandipra mahagunashtata. Vaishnavis, please. Uduvacha yatha parikshid javarya sikshaya Nagvata Chasasaha Nastata Uduvacha Tatha parikshid jasarya sikshaya Mahi mahabhagavatak susasaha Tathai sutyam abhijatako Samadhi sandipra mahagunastata Suduvacha Tathah parikshid dvijasarya sikshaya Mahi mahabhagavatak shusasaha Yatahi sutyam abhijata govida Samadhi sandipra mahagunastata Sutta uvacha Sutta Goswami said Tatak thereafter Parikshit Maharaj Parikshit Dvijavarya the great twice-born Brahmanas Shikshaya by their instructions Mahim the earth Mahabhagavatak the great devotee Shashasa ruled Ha in the past Yatha as they told it He certainly Sutyam at the time of his birth Abhijata Kovidah expert astrologers at the time of birth Samadhishan gave their opinions Vipra O Brahmanas Mahat Guna great qualities Tatha true to that Translation Suta Goswami said, "O learned Brahmanas, Maharaj Parikshit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord under the instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth." Please repeat. Suta Goswami said, "O learned Brahmanas, Maharaj Parikshit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord, under the instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth." So his birth was incredible, and as we'll find out, his death was absolutely astounding. So here's Srila Prabhupada's purport. At the time of Maharaj Parikshit's birth, the expert astrologer Brahmanas foretold some of his qualities. Maharaj Parikshit developed all those qualities, being a great devotee of the Lord. The real qualification is to become a devotee of the Lord, and gradually all the good qualities worthy of possession develop. Maharaj Parikshit was a Mahabhagavat, or a first-class devotee, who was not only well versed in the science of devotion, but also able to convert others to become devotees by his transcendental instructions. Maharaj Parikshit was therefore a devotee of the first order, and thus he used to consult great sages and learned Brahmanas who could advise him by the Shastras how to execute the state administration. Such great kings were more responsible than modern elected executive heads, because they obliged the great authorities by following their instructions left in Vedic literatures. There was no need for impractical fools to enact daily a new legislative bill and to conveniently alter it again and again to serve some purpose. The rules and regulations were already set forth by great sages like Manu, Yajnavalkya, Parashara, and other liberated sages, and the enactments were all suitable for all ages in all places. Therefore, the rules and regulations were standard and without flaw or defect. Kings like Maharaj Parikshit had their council of advisors, and all the members of that council were either great sages or brahmanas of the first order. They did not accept any salary, nor had they any necessity for such salaries. The state would get the best advice without expenditure. They were themselves Samadarshi, equal to everyone, both man and animal. They would not advise the king to give protection to man and instruct him to kill the poor animals. Such council members were not fools or representatives to compose a fool's paradise. They were all self-realized souls, and they knew perfectly well how all living beings in the state would be happy, both in this life and in the next. They were not concerned with the hedonistic philosophy of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. They were philosophers in the real sense, and they knew well what is the mission of human life. Under all these obligations, the advisory council of the king would give correct directions, and the king or executive head, being himself a qualified devotee of the Lord, would scrutinizingly follow them for the welfare of the state. The state in the days of Maharaj Yudhishthir or Maharaj Parikshit was a welfare state in the real sense of the term, because no one was unhappy in that state, be he man or animal. Maharaj Parikshit was an ideal king for a welfare state of the world. Sutuvacha tatak parikshi dvijavarya shikshaya mahing maha bhagavatak shashasaha itahi sutyam abhijatako vidach samadhishan vipra mahad gunas tata. Translation again. Sutta Goswami said, O learned Brahmanas, Maharaj Parikshit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord under the instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So thank you to Archita Prabhu and for everyone for this opportunity to address you. I hope you get something worthwhile out of today's class. So in today's class, I'm going to basically look at two things. I want to take a brief look ahead in the Bhagavatam and even visit the astounding passing of Maharaj Parikshit and some of the immediate events leading up to that. And secondly, I want to address the issue of what I call incredulity, which means disbelief. If you've ever come across a passage in the Bhagavatam that you find hard to believe, how do you deal with that? So, a funny thing happens just a few verses ahead in this chapter. Sutta Goswami has barely begun narrating the pastimes of Maharaj Parikshit. And just 3 verses from now, Sutta describes how Parikshit comes across a less than Sudra. The term is Shudraka, which Prabhupada alternately translates as lowest of the Sudras or less than Sudra. In other words, more or less like us, not a very high birth. Not all of us, but anyway, speak for myself. So Parikshit Maharaj comes across this less than Sudra, but he's disguised as a king. And he's whacking the legs of a cow and a bull. And what does Parikshit Maharaj do? He detains him in order to decide what is the best punishment. So when all of a sudden, this is the amazing thing, Shaunaka Rishi and the sages at Namasharanya are all, whoa, what does this have to do with Krishna? Please don't waste our time. They couldn't believe. Why did they say this? They couldn't believe that Maharaj Parikshit didn't just kill this rascal on the spot, which is how he would probably have disposed of any other person doing such a thing. Of course, that didn't happen very often, or probably never. So Shaunaka says, tat kat yatam ha bhaga yadi Krishna katashrayam. He says, please describe this incident only if it is connected with Krishna. And in the next verse he says, Kimanyai rasad alapayar ayusho yarasad vyaya. What is the use of topics which simply wastes one's valuable time? And I was thinking that would be as if Sura Prabhu or Archita Prabhu stands up and says, whoa, Jaya Jagadisha, what are you talking about? Stop talking this nonsense. Talk about Krishna. Of course, I hope that doesn't happen, but it would be a little unsettling. So, as we know, the initial reciting of the Bhagavatam by Sukadeva Goswami went on for just 7 days. But what we're hearing is the recitation by Sutta Goswami at Naimisharanya. And the sacrifice at Naimisharanya was meant to go on for 1,000 years. And yet, Shaunaka Rishi is all, hey, don't waste our valuable time. Anyway, to add more weight to his argument, Shaunaka then does some heavy name dropping. He mentions that Yamaraj himself, the controller of death and the representative of the Supreme Lord, is right here in this assembly. In other words, this is a big time event. Some heavy-duty VIPs are here. Please don't waste everyone's time. Of course, the real reason he drops Yamaraj's name is to claim that as long as Yamaraj is present, no one shall meet with death. In other words, the way to conquer death is by hearing the recitation of the pastimes of the Lord. Well, Sutta Goswami is no slouch, so he doesn't really appear fazed by Shonaka's, you could call it, challenge, or at least his statements. Sutta then goes on to describe the glories of Maharaj Parikshit's reign and touches upon the famous conversation between Dharma the bull and Mother Earth the cow. And then, as if to support why he brought up the incident with Maharaj Parikshit and Kali and the bull and the cow, the entire next chapter, chapter 17, is devoted exactly to that. And it's called The Punishment and Reward of Kali, Tushe Sutta. So as I said, the Bhagavatam was originally spoken by Shukadeva Goswami. Does anyone know how old he was? I'll answer the question. He was about 16 years old, spoken to Maharaj Parikshit, and he was about 60 years old at the time. Now, does anyone know where this momentous conversation took place? So it took place in a town which is now known as Shukratal. Does anyone know the translation of Shukratal? I'm looking at you because, you know. No. Okay. So if you travel from Delhi in a northeasterly direction about 90 miles, according to Google Maps, in today's traffic that would be about 3 hours, you come to Shukratal. And what you'll find at Shukratal is the shrine to Shukadeva Goswami in this momentous event, and that's called the Bhagavat Peet Shukdev Ashram. And the amazing thing about this, there's several amazing things, that it was built surrounding a tree. In India, this is common. For example, all Vrindavan temple is built around a tree in a sense. In the tree, there's a courtyard, okay? But the amazing thing about this tree is that it is 5,100 years old. The tree was the first person there when Bhagavatam began to be recited. And the name of that tree is the Akshay Vriksha tree. And it sits on top of a hill where 80,000 sages gathered to hear Sukadeva Goswami speak the Bhagavatam. So, again, the version of the Bhagavatam that we're studying was spoken by Sutta Goswami, who was in the audience when Parikshit heard from Sukadeva Goswami. So if you travel from Shukratal in a southeasterly direction for about 250 miles, about 8 hours in today's traffic, you're sort of following the general footprint of Uttar Pradesh in India. You come to the holy site of Naimisharanya, where Sutta recited what he heard from Shukadev with, of course, his own transcendental elaborations. So does anyone know how much time elapsed between the original speaking of the Bhagavatam by Shukadeva Goswami and then the second recitation by Sutta Goswami? I didn't know, but I heard a class recently from the Alachua temple, and the speaker said that it was 65 years. 65 years elapsed from Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Parikshit, and then Sutta Goswami speaking to Sutta Goswami speaking to Shaunaka Rishi and the sages at Naimisharanya. And I heard something else that kind of blew my mind from a devotee scholar at the Alachua temple. When the sages first heard that later on in Kali Yuga, the flesh of the cow and the bull would be sold on a mass scale in public marketplaces, 60,000 of them passed out from the shock. It's almost like us hearing that pretty soon we'll be able to kill our babies and sell their flesh on the open marketplace. It was like that incomprehensible to these sages at Naimisharanya or at Shukratal. So I want to relate one more incident about Maharaj Parikshit's passing. As we all know, Maharaj Parikshit was cursed to die by a creature we have no experience with in the West, a snake bird or a tukshak. So what I'm about to say comes from the 12th canto and from the writings of a devotee, Stephen Knapp, a.k.a. Sri Nandanandana Prabhu. And Nandanandana Prabhu has written 27 books on various aspects of Vedic culture and Krishna consciousness. So now I'm quoting, "Having attained the perfection of yoga, Maharaj Parikshit experienced full self-realization and was free from material attachment and doubt. He settled his mind within his spiritual self. His life air ceased to move. and he became as stationary as a tree. Sometimes I see these, either on video or in person, these people who make themselves as statues and paint themselves gold or silver, and they're able to stand, without moving for quite some time. I don't think I'm able to do that. But Maharaj Parikshit was so advanced and in such deep state of internal realization, he became as stationary as a tree. As the time came when the curse was to take effect, the snake bird, Takshak, who could shift into any shape he wanted, was traveling toward Shukratal in the guise of a Brahmana to bite the king. As Takshak was nearing Shukratal, he met the Brahmin Kashyapa Muni. Now later on we'll find that Kashyapa Muni figures very prominently in the Bhagavatam. He's the husband of Aditi and Diti, which makes him basically the father of all the demigods and father of all the demons. And most famously, I believe, he's the father of Vamanadev, the dwarf incarnation of Krishna. So Takshak is heading towards Shukratal to do his dirty deed, and he comes across Kashyapa Muni, and Kashyapa Muni was traveling in a hurry. So Takshak asked him where he was going. And Kashyapa Muni, he happened to know the science of counteracting poisons. And he was going to meet King Parikshit because he could neutralize the effect of the snake bite. So Takshak decided to test the sage. He exposed his fangs and he bit a green tree which turned to ashes in seconds. Then Kashyapa chanted some mantras and the tree was restored and as green as before. So Takshak then asked whether the sage was going in order to receive some rewards for his knowledge, and the sage replied that he was. Takshak then said that he could reward Kashyapa more than the king, but on one condition. Kashyapa need to turn around and go back home. So the Brahmana Kashyapa took much wealth from Takshak and returned home. So the place where Takshak first encountered Kashyapa is 5 miles away from Shukratal, and the place where Takshak then asked Kashyapa to return home is a mile down the road. So it's 4 miles from this historic place, Shukratal. When Takshak got to the area of King Parikshit, he was not allowed to enter, of course. So he changed himself into a caterpillar and entered one of the fruit baskets being taken to the king. Now, I was thinking that a fruit basket for someone who is fasting from sleep, eat, food, and drink, a fruit basket is more or less symbolic. So, on reaching the king, Takshaka came out of the fruit, he assumed the form of a Brahmana, and then he easily approached the king, and while the king was in meditation, bit him. As everyone looked on in horror, the king's body was immediately turned to ashes by the fire of the snake's poison. Thus, Maharaj Parikshit left his body and, immersed in the absolute truth of the Supreme Being, felt no pain as he entered the spiritual world. This is why the whole area of Shukratal is full with the sweetness of bhakti or devotion of Lord Sri Krishna. End quote. So I was thinking and I was wondering whether Maharaj Parikshit had informed his family that he was cursed to die in 7 days, where he was going, and how he planned on spending the last 7 days of his life. And I think probably not, because when his son, we'll learn very soon, Janamejaya, heard the news of Maharaj Parikshit's death from the bite of the snake bird, he was extremely angry and he wanted to avenge his great father's unlawful cursing and death. There's another end-of-life situation in the Bhagavatam. It's quite moving. Dhritarashtra was aging, but not quite on the verge of death, when he and his wife Gandhari, at the urging of his brother Vidura, left for the forest in the middle of the night without informing Yudhishthir and without informing his personal secretary Sanjaya. So as I said, it's a very touching scene, because Sanjaya is completely distraught when his master is nowhere to be found, and he can hardly believe that what took place, because he doesn't know what took place really. Simply Dhritarashtra is gone, because he had been in Dhritarashtra's service for a long, long time, and Dhritarashtra never did anything or made any decision without first consulting Sanjaya. So it was very, very shocking. But Prabhupada writes that this is the way it should be done. for one's final journey, one should leave in the middle of the night without informing anyone. So I think it's reasonable to conclude that Maharaj Parikshit probably left home without informing his family. Part 2. If you've ever come across a passage in the Srimad Bhagavatam that, as they say, strains credulity, in other words, a passage that you find hard to accept or believe, you're not alone. My wife and I read the Bhagavatam to each other daily for about a half hour, and we occasionally come across statements that, quite honestly, from our Western Kali Yuga impersonalist women's lib upbringing, doesn't jibe or don't jibe with the beliefs and cosmology that we were raised with. But you know the saying, I think it came from the Catholic Church, if you have them by 7, you have them for life. In other words, if that's true, I would say it's not impossible, but it's practically impossible for most of us to totally and completely abandon some of the core beliefs we were raised with. And that's where a little reality check is in order. So, on the one hand, there's me, and then on the other hand, there's Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, Sukadeva, Lord Chaitanya, the Six Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, and the entire Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. There's raised in an atheistic, meat-eating family, me, and raised by a pure devotee to worship Radha Krishna from his early childhood, Srila Prabhupada. There's struggling to control his mind and senses, me, and there's the ever-enlightened, never-sinning Shukdev. There's depressive, doubting Thomas, me, and there's the ever-enlightened spaceman, Prabhupada calls him, Narada Muni. So as I was thinking about this more and more, it occurred to me that if I have any problems with the Bhagavatam, the text that Lord Chaitanya and his followers worshipped and read regularly, maybe that's just a punishment for my degraded past. Just like if I think the deity of Krishna is made of stone, or if I think that the spiritual master is an ordinary person. If I doubt the Bhagavatam in the slightest, it just means I'm still immersed in the bodily concept of life, and I have many miles to traverse before I taste true transcendence. Of course, it doesn't do any good to beat myself up or to hate myself after painfully lamenting the reality of my novice state. But as I said earlier, an occasional reality check can be healthy. As I told my wife the other day, when Shukadeva Goswami narrated the Srimad Bhagavatam, he wasn't concerned with how many likes he got on Facebook. Shukadeva was so detached from material life that he voluntarily remained packed up in his mother's womb for 12 years before he decided to come out. And when he did emerge, he immediately left home without bothering to get dressed or even look around and say goodbye to his grieving parents. Let's talk a little bit about Shukadeva Goswami. In the 8th canto, Shukadeva names the current Manu, or universal leader, and then goes on to name not only the next 7 Manus, but also the Lord's principal incarnation, the name of the person who holds the post of Indra, the principal demigods, and the 7 great sages. And he does this through 7 more Manvantars, which are reigns of Manu. And earlier in the Bhagavatam, he had given similar details about the 6 previous Manus. So how much time does this cover? Well, each Manu reigns for a period of 71 Yuga cycles, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali Yuga. And each such cycle is 4,320,000 Earth years. So if each Manu reigns for a period of 71 such cycles, 71 times 4,320,000 Earth years is 306,720,000 Earth years. And there are 14 Manus in a day of Brahma, which totals about 4.3 billion Earth years. Now, I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but Shukadeva Goswami had perfect vision into the past and into the future so that he could give details about universal management over a 4.3 billion year cycle. So, whenever my wife and I come across a passage in the Bhagavatam that is challenging, I remember that Sukadeva Goswami had no business creating phantasmagoria or imaginary stories for his or for anyone's amusement. So what does it mean to be a liberated soul versus a conditioned soul? Well, a conditioned soul is addicted to his own point of view. A conditioned soul sees himself as more or less the center of the universe. A conditioned soul suffers from the defects of making mistakes, being an illusion, cheating, and having imperfect senses. The conditioned soul suffers from the threefold miseries due to nature, to other living entities, and to his own mind and body. And finally, the conditioned soul suffers from kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, and matsarya, or lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and envy. I think I'm quite advanced, but in fact I'm blind. For example, if I step outside my home and look around, if I don't see that everything is personal, what does that make me? That makes me an impersonalist because everything is personal. There are spirit souls everywhere in all life forms in varying stages of consciousness. Krishna is within every atom and within the heart of all living beings. Krishna has expanded his own energy to become the material creation, and he supports and maintains it. But if I don't see Krishna and Krishna's energy everywhere, that means I don't see things as they are. Rather, I see things as I choose to see them impersonally. I see myself as superior to beings in lower consciousness. I see other human beings as either possible threats or even possible objects of attraction. But at the same time, I wouldn't mind owning that hunk of inert matter down the street known as a Maserati. So the bottom line is, it would do me good to remind myself that I'm in a compressed, diseased state of consciousness. And in that condition, I cannot conceive of consciousness beyond my own, just as an ant crawling on my arm has no idea of the human body, let alone human consciousness. As a conditioned soul, I cannot conceive of someone walking on earth in human form who is above all the frailties and imperfections of conditioned life. So that's, and this is where I'm closing now, that's where the idea of submissive oral reception comes in. I need to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam submissively. And when I come across a passage that doesn't necessarily jive with or support my own conditioned worldview, first of all, I think it's best to honestly acknowledge that I'm having a hard time accepting something, and then pray for the submissiveness to let go of my own tiny worldview and be able to see things from Krishna's point of view, which is exactly what Prabhupada said a pure devotee does. He sees things from Krishna's point of view. Prabhupada once asked the devotees rhetorically, what is the single most important quality to strive for? And he answered his own question, submissiveness. So as Prabhupada writes today in the purport about Maharaj Parikshit, Maharaj Parikshit used to consult great sages and learned brahmanas who could advise him by the Shastras how to execute the state administration. Such great kings were more responsible than modern elected executive heads because they obliged the great authorities by following their instructions left in Vedic literatures, unquote. So we cannot imagine the strength spiritually, physically, mentally of Maharaj Parikshit, and yet he was completely submissive to the great sages, to the learned brahmanas, and the sacred texts. But I don't want to leave things on a slightly negative tone, so even if we're novices on the path, we have the absolutely best lifestyle that one could imagine. We commune daily with God in the form of His holy name. We eat the delicious transcendental remnants of food offered to Him. We dance in ecstasy every day while we behold the Lord's all-beautiful form, and we have the opportunity to form the deepest friendships imaginable based not on mutual exploitation, but on the deepest love, caring, and well wishes. Thank you very much. I'll end here. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.